Good afternoon. Again, welcome to the Dr. Kenny D podcast. And we're starting here today on Monday. It's the last day in November. Getting a little bit ahead of our December schedule, but that's okay. We have to take folks as they become available. So hopefully you'll go out to Facebook and look at the interviews. They're also on my YouTube channel. And please take a look at the Foundation's website, which is Daniels-foundation.org. You also might be able to get there by the danielsfoundation.com. Still might be an available website search. So again, I want to thank Donald Hahn yesterday for doing a fantastic job of letting us into his life, some of his family experiences. Hope you guys found that very interesting and comforting to know that Donald is doing well, had a prosperous career, has a wonderful family, and I think we all can say that we love Donald Hahn. So today, we have a nice follow-up. Going to keep the momentum going with Mr. Steven Rosenberg. And Mr. Rosenberg was essentially the high school teacher at East Orange High School from 1968 to 2002. And essentially, he also was the social studies department chair. His formal education started at Fairlawn High School, class of 1959, followed by a BA from Fairleigh Dickinson University, class of 1963. He then went on to get a master's at the New School for Social Research, class of 1965, followed up with a Fairleigh Dickinson Ford Foundation Scholarship in 1967. And then we were lucky enough to get him at East Orange High School. Be interested to find out how that happened in 1968. And just think about it, he stayed from 1968 to 2000. That shows a level of dedication, a level of loyalty. That's a 30-year fabulous career. And we want to thank Mr. Rosenberg for essentially his loyalty and providing us a role model for excellence and success. So that's going to be pretty much my little introduction today for Mr. Rosenberg and the Daniels Foundation. And next up, you'll be hearing Steve Rosenberg. And we'll go from there and have a very interesting talk for about an hour. Again, I apologize for not being able to have live questions, but again, we'll get some follow-up after the post that you'll be able to get in touch with Mr. Rosenberg and ask some questions that I might have missed. Again, happy holidays, and thank you for listening. And so good afternoon again, and we're now here at about 3 p.m. And guess what, guys? I have the good fortune of having with in front of me Mr. Steven Rosenberg. Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Living large here in Boca Raton, Florida, and things are good.
Well, fantastic. So, I have a bunch of questions, but before we get started, I want to give you, a couple of minutes, or you could take as long as you want to, just give an intro of, what you've been up to, and say hello to the, classmates and anything that might be on your mind. So, what would you like to say?
Yeah, well, I'd like to give a quick hello to all of my former students, anybody who's been watching me rant and rave on Facebook over the last 4 years or so. Actually, Facebook has been a very positive revelation to me because it's allowed me to reconnect with a lot of my former students who I certainly lost track of over the years. I've been out of East Orange High School since the year 2000. I started there in 1967, 68. It was a long haul. I had a lot of great experiences, some not so great, but that's the way life is. And since I've retired from the high school, I was still living in New Jersey at the time. I was teaching at the County College of Morris as a history professor. I taught American history and government there for a couple of years before we moved from North Jersey to South Jersey. And we were living in Waretown, New Jersey, or my wife used to call it Nowhere Town, because when we moved down there was nothing going on. Waretown is between Barnegat and Forked River. For anybody who knows the shore area, we're right actually between the Garden State Parkway and Route 9. It was a golf course community, beautiful. That's what drew me down there, not my wife so much. And we were there from 2003 to about 2012, where we moved down to Florida. At the time, I had told my wife that if we moved again, it was her choice where we would go. she was kind enough to let us move to South Jersey for that golf course, which was an adult community there. But my wife is from Denver. She hates cold weather. She wanted warm weather. And so we moved to Florida, and we've been here, ever since.
Fantastic. I am also a part-time Florida native. I call myself a black snowbird. So, I might pop in on you for some golf at Boca at some point if you have me. I know we can't do it during the COVID, but it might be fun to catch up and shoot the breeze. So if you're entertained that. So let me jump right in, and again, want to thank you for making yourself available time-wise. I know we're all busy, and I know people are curious of reconnecting with you because you touched a lot of students while you were teaching, as you alluded to, at East Orange, and I was amazed at the dedication of the 30-year career, something that I also spent at one place for 30 years. So, one of the first questions I have is, can you talk a little about your background, your formal education, maybe your formative years as a child, a kid, and maybe your family, how that had an impact on, the type of person you are, what you chose as a career, something of that nature?
Well, I'll tell you, I consider myself in many respects very lucky. In my formative years, actually, I lived in Paterson, New Jersey from almost the time I was born in the Bronx, but we moved to Paterson, I guess within the first few months after I was born. My brother is 5 years older than I am. We moved to Paterson, so we're talking 1943. I was there from 43 to 1954. Now, Paterson at the time was, for me, a great experience. It was a real city. It had a beautiful downtown, 5 or 6 movie theaters, pretty multicultural. When we first moved to Paterson, I lived in the projects. My parents were, my dad wanted to be a Spanish teacher, but he had developed polio when he was young, and he would not be able to pass the physical, so he never was able to become the teacher that he wanted to be. So in order to provide for his family, he became a salesman. My mom was a homemaker until we moved to Fair Lawn, which was 2 towns over in 1954. And we lived in Fair Lawn, which was pretty much a white town as opposed to Paterson. As I said, Paterson was we had every ethnic group that you can imagine living in Paterson back in the day. And I think it was very good for me, number one, to see all different kinds of people and relate to different kinds of people. How much effect it had on me at the time, I have no idea, nor to this day do I really know. I think that it was a positive, for sure. And so that's early on. So I went to Fair Lawn High School, graduated in 1959. Was a marginal student at best. I was very young. When we moved from Paterson to Fair Lawn, I either had to be put back a half a year or put ahead a half a year, because Paterson had registration twice a year, Fair Lawn only once a year. And I got caught in the middle when we moved. So I guess they gave me, I didn't know what kind of a test it was. I assumed that was probably the Stanford-Binet, the IQ test or something. God knows how I must have done okay, because they actually put me ahead, which actually was to my detriment, because I was so young. I didn't even drive until after I graduated high school.
Wow.
And I graduated in June of 59. I became 17 in August of 59. Wow. So that the fact that I was so young and immature had a clear impact upon my ability as a student, I think. As I say, I was a marginal student at best, C+ student, didn't know what I wanted to do. My brother, on the other hand, who was 5 years older than me, was an outstanding student, went to Indiana University, graduated first in his class of the School of Economics, ultimately went to Columbia Law School, became a very successful lawyer. So I had that to deal with.
That's pretty impressive. To Indiana, yeah.
It was impressive for him and depressive for me in that regard.
Yeah.
But Over a period of time, I slowly but surely found myself as I grew up and matured. I think it helped me a great deal as a teacher because I understood that people develop at different times in their lives. They mature at different times. Some people mature early, some people do not.
Right.
I always try to pass that on to my students, that the way you see yourself right now may very well not be the way you see yourself a year, 2, 3, 10 years from the time that I met you. And it was something that I always try to impress upon them. I wanted to let them look into themselves and be introspective. And that was my teaching style as much as anything else as well, is to be very human to them and to try to tell it as I saw it and give them a chance to give it right back to me as well.
Right. Yeah, I think you were a straight shooter most of the time. Well, let me give like a little follow up to that, just to dig deeper. Can you talk about maybe 1 or 2 significant events or people that impacted you during that time period you're talking about, that you were maybe immature and transitioned to mature, that you could think that visibly had effect? Because it's always interesting for young people to think of a role model or mentor. And I think we need to kind of promote the impact of this. So what would you kind of say of something along those lines?
Well, early on, I really can't say that I had a role model at all. I always admired my dad in particular for doing what he had to do in order to raise a family, even though he was somewhat unhappy because he was not ever able to achieve the goals that he wanted to. But instead of, giving up and turning away, he stuck to it, did what he had to do, wound up being able to send both myself and my brother to college. My mom was worked most of her life until she did retire. So we had, my mom was a homemaker until we moved to Fair Lawn. Then she got a job working for the town of Fair Lawn. So she worked while we grew. My dad was working. So my brother and I were left pretty much on our own for for quite a while, which didn't hurt. It forced us to make some decisions. We didn't make too many bad ones, along the way. Interestingly, because of my immaturity and because I was still looking for myself, finding myself, I went to college. I went to Fairleigh Dickinson University, got a bachelor's degree. Again, was only a marginal student for the first couple of years. I started getting, for whatever reason, more serious. I became a very good student. My last 2 years, made Dean's List both my junior and senior year. But a person that had a great deal impact on me, interesting enough, was a girlfriend of mine at the time, who really kind of set me straight about a lot of things. She was very bright, more mature than I was. I kind of understood that I had to get my act together, and did. She really suggested that I go for a graduate degree while I was still finding myself. I went to the New School for Social Research in New York City, which is a very well-known school. They have a huge number of visiting professors from NYU, Columbia, so forth and so on. And we broke up a year after I graduated from grad school, and didn't see her for the next God knows how many years. And then 1 year, I'm coming out of my house. I'm living in Rockaway Township. I'm married with 3 kids.
Yeah.
And there's a woman standing on the lawn next to my house. And I look at her, and it was her. It was my ex-girlfriend.
Wow.
What happened was, when I was going out with her, I met, her name is Anne. I met 2 of her 3 best friends while we were together. I never met her 3rd best friend. My next door neighbor was her 3rd best friend.
Really?
Blew me away, blew us away. And I've been in touch with her ever since. So I really consider her a very, very important person in my life. That's about it. I really haven't had, until I went to graduate school, where I had a couple of incredible professors. I was going for another master's degree, an MAT, Masters of Arts in Teaching.
I was
And
going to ask you
we
what
had,
that was. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, and we had, it was a Ford, I don't know whether the Ford Foundation started it,
Hmm.
but I got a scholarship from Ford Foundation to go to grad school. And I
Hmm.
had two unbelievable mentors in that program. And if I had to picture a role model, it would have been the two of them, because both of them tended to be Renaissance men. They did not just focus purely on whatever the subject was. They just had a wide range of knowledge about literature, the arts, all kinds of things. Me, on the other hand, did not, but that kind of thing led me to start doing a lot more reading, a lot more exploration.
Hmm.
And I think that they, unbeknownst to them, made me a much better, a much better person, much better teacher.
Fact, yeah. So building on that, how did you come to teach at East Orange High School School District, and what were your other opportunities?
Well, I'll tell you, I started teaching actually at West Essex Regional in Essex County, which is a very wealthy suburban school district, has 4 sending districts.
Hmm.
I was there for a couple of years. I wound up deciding that that was not for me. I had a lot of great kids. In fact, one of my former students was Joe Piscopo.
Oh,
Do you know
really?
Joe?
Yeah, I know the comedian.
Well,
Yeah.
Joe's claim to fame when I was there was him starting a food fight in the cafeteria. Uh,
Well, he seems
but
like that kind of guy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. He was in character even at an
Yeah.
early age. But
Hmm.
I got very disillusioned there. Uh, I had some very good friends there, but the administration really was like uh, so upholding to the parents that if a parent, luckily I didn't have a problem with a parent, but I saw other teachers that were having problems. The parent would come in and complain. And this was in my years of idealism. And from the administrative viewpoint, if you were guilty until proven innocent, if a parent
Yeah.
complained about you. And I had a couple of incidents there that I just didn't, I decided it wasn't for me. And I left after 2 years and was kind of disillusioned with teaching, and went
Hmm.
out of the profession completely for a year. Realized that I still missed it, and decided I'd go another route. And again, my idealism took me to East Orange. I interviewed at East Orange the with a principal and department head who I thought were just two wonderful people. And this was just after the Newark riots, mind you. I was
Hmm.
there in '68.
Right. Hmm.
And first year, very tough for any white teacher in the school, for sure.
Well,
The older ones in particular.
let's be a little bit descriptive about that, because I think people might want to know, what was the student population in 1968? Was it predominantly Black, or was it, and then I'm sure it shifted to more Black over time. Can you be a little bit more specific
Yeah,
about the student
I,
population specifically? Was it?
I would say when I first got there, we were probably looking at 30% white, 70% Black, maybe a little higher percentage of white. I can't be sure.
Uh-huh.
Ultimately, uh, the problems there just got worse and worse, where they wound up actually moving the white kids over to Scott.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
And, my understanding or my remembrance was I don't ever remember any real clashes between the white kids and the Black kids. I honestly I can't recall any, kind of physical kind of thing. There were arguments and things like that.
Yeah.
I remember one of the funniest things, and I don't know, do you know who Dr. Aubrey Hendricks is?
I do not know.
Oh, well, he was Buddy Hendricks at the time.
Okay.
He is at least a nationally renowned biblical scholar.
I'll have to
Now,
look him
he's got
up.
a PhD. He teaches, I think, still at Columbia University. Buddy and I banged heads for the entire year that he was in my class, but I loved him nonetheless because I knew he was very bright and very
What's
passionate.
his last name again?
Hendricks, Hendricks. First
Okay.
name Obery.
O-B.
Aubrey Hendricks. Yeah, you should look him up. And actually, he's somebody that I
Okay.
strongly recommend that you get in touch with and interview him. because
Okay,
he
I'll do
will be
that.
able to tell you some stories, because
Uh-huh.
he was a student leader in the very early, in 1970, 71,
Yeah.
when we had all kinds of issues. He led a few walkouts, etc. But he, uh, as I say, I always liked him, and now we're very good friends. Actually, we keep in touch on a pretty regular basis. Uh, but the school back then, as I said, was about 70% black. Ultimately, when the white kids were moved out, it ultimately became all black. A
Right.
couple of Hispanic kids, Donald and Dewey Hom were there.
Right.
Bill Bright, who I think Donald may very well remember Bill Bright, who was, I think, valedictorian in his senior year.
Mm-hmm.
But it was as I said, for the first year, for me, it was tough. For the older white teachers who had grown up as teachers in that district, it was they couldn't handle what was going on.
Right.
The black kids really gave them a very hard time. They couldn't deal with the kids at all, and it was just something that ultimately drove most of the older white teachers out.
Mm-hmm.
And we started getting an influx, me included, of some younger teachers, many of whom were white,
Mm-hmm.
who became very good friends. I became very good friends with them, and still in touch with with some of them.
Right.
And the funny it's not funny. The thing of it is that the early years for me, in the 70s in particular, were in many ways, I couldn't have asked for a better situation. I had an unbelievable number of great students that I'm still in touch with. My AP class of 74 was actually the ultimate class. I had the kids for 2 years. Donna Alexander,
Yeah.
who is, known, should be known if she's not, and should always be known. Donna was valedictorian in her senior year. Went on to University of Pennsylvania, undergrad, University of Pennsylvania Veterinary School.
Yeah, that's another person I should interview. Her. She'd be a great
Donna,
interview.
unfortunately, passed away.
Oh, she passed?
Uh,
Oh,
the Alexander, Edna Alexander had 2 kids. Joyce, who was another stalwart, great student. I think Joyce must have graduated in 72, perhaps.
mm-hmm.
Buddy Hendricks would be able to be more exact because they were very good friends. And Joyce became a very well-known lawyer. She lived in the Cherry Hill area. She died young.
But
Donna,
wasn't Donna on the cover of one of the magazines?
yes,
Yeah,
yes, she was.
that's
Well, she was the
something like
Brett
that.
girl. She
Yeah,
was the Brett girl.
the Brett girl.
The
Yeah,
shampoo. But Donna was also the first black state junior miss winner in the country, in the history of the junior miss pageant. She won the state of New Jersey.
wow, that's
And
impressive.
then she went on, she became one of the 5 finalists in the national pageant, won the Outstanding Student Award in the national pageant.
Wow,
She
that's
was
pretty good representation for East Orange.
she was all world.
Yeah,
Cheerleader,
yeah.
pretty, super bright, super opinionated,
Mm-hmm.
loved her.
I'm sure you did. Well, you were lucky,
Another,
lucky to have her.
as I said, I had the kids for 2 years, and that class of 74.
Was that Paul Grandy too? Paul Grandy in
I
that
was
class?
just going to mention, because I know that you ran into him right at the Hall of Fame.
At the Hall of Fame, I ran to Paul. Yes.
Right, exactly. So in fact, I just spoke to Paul week and a half ago, and he was in that class.
Mm-hmm.
The 2 of them, and I could name 5, 6, 7 others that I still remember vividly.
That's 2.
I like that class so much that the second year I had them, I was able to arrange to have the class at the end of the day, so I always had something to look forward to.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty good company there, Donna Alexander and Paul Grandy. And hopefully we'll get a chance to hear this interview. And I have my own Paul Grandy story, but I'll save it.
But the basketball story?
It's a baseball story, but we claim Paul as a Washington Park resource. We have Washington Park in East Orange is legendary for a lot of class acts, and Paul is one of them. I put
Right.
Darryl Harris in that class also, class act. Tom Lynch, I don't know if you remember Tommy Lynch.
Yeah, I do. I
Basically,
do.
he's also, so we, growing up, I had some real good role models that, I was lucky. And I put my brothers in there also, so, and it was just a special time. That's part of this whole project, is trying to go back and do these interviews and document people's experiences and maybe get some stories and maybe write a second book along these lines. And I have a grant in with the National Endowment for the Humanities to kind of do that. And so it's
Great
kind of a little
idea.
bit of the research needed. But let me get back to you. This is your time. So, along those lines, you then went from teacher to administrator. And
Well,
your department.
I never considered myself an administrator in the true sense of the word.
Right.
Department heads were not part of the administrative bargaining unit,
Okay.
contract wise. We had our own unit. We never wanted to become part of that unit because, frankly, how do I put this? Let's put it this way.
Don't cut. Let it go. Let it
I was
flow.
there. I was in East Orange for 30 plus years.
Yes.
30 plus years. I keep on trying to count, and I think I had 10 principals to deal with.
Wow.
In 30 years. Take one of them out because he was there for 10 years. Then you're talking about 9 principals in like 20 years.
Wow, that's almost 2 a year.
Exactly.
That's horrible.
In that time period, I had what I considered, other than the first 1 or 2 that were there for a short period of time, I had what I considered 2 outstanding principals.
Mm-hmm.
One was Barbara Darden. If you went to VLD,
Yeah.
those who went to VLD remember her very well. She was a great teacher, one of the finest people I've ever met in my life.
Okay.
She's now 88 years old. She was in East Orange, I think, for 3 years, maybe 4. But the place got to her. She had some health issues. She now lives in Durham, North Carolina. Super, period. Bright, understood what real teaching was all about. I cried when she left.
Sure.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I did.
Mm-hmm.
The other person I had that I thought was outstanding for the school was actually a man who came in as a vice principal. His wife had become the superintendent in Orange. His name was Lawrence Pigeot. He was a Cajun, Pigeaux.
Mm-hmm.
Another outstanding man who his wife actually lost the job, I guess, a year or 2 later. And so they wound up moving, I think, to Indianapolis. But he was another outstanding person. Unfortunately, many of the others that either followed or preceded them, I thought I clashed with many of them. And I clashed with them.
Let me interject there, because a lot of people are going to be surprised that you left one name out. And you know what I'm going to say, which is Mr. Frank Penn.
All right.
And so could you discuss, I think people would be really interested in, your viewpoint.
I was taught a long time ago that if I don't have something good to say about somebody, that unless there was something to really be had by saying it, not to. Suffice it to say that Frank and I clashed a great deal. I actually went to arbitration against him.
Okay.
Because he tried to do me in because I just would not go along with him. I was the chairman of what at the time was called the Teacher Administrative Liaison Committee. So as a classroom teacher, I met with the administration regularly. Mm-hmm. And he and I just didn't see eye to eye about a lot of things. And because of that, when the department head's job first came up, I got the unanimous recommendation of the interviewing committee, which I think had 8 people on it, 2 teachers, 2 administrators, 2 parents, and 2 students. I got the unanimous recommendation and he vetoed it.
Wow.
And
yeah, I understand. I've been in those similar circumstances. So,
right. So bottom line is he was there for 10 years. He's the one that was there for 10 years.
Right.
that I mentioned before.
Yeah.
And there are many students have some very good memories about him,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to tarnish that. I'm sure that a teacher's viewpoint of an administrator sometimes will be significantly different than a student's view of an administrator and or a department head as well.
Right. Okay, let's move on. I think that's fair enough. So, recently I just had Donald Hahn on, and he spoke about the Chinese Exclusion Act.
Right.
And I don't know if you saw that interview or not.
No, I haven't yet.
Okay. But Donald talked about about things that he did not learn in history relative to what he did learn. And I want to pose the question as, how do you decide about what content to teach us? And did you feel that we had, given that we were African American, did you feel that we had enough exposure to African American history? How did you kind of make that balance or call on what was the curriculum and so forth?
Well, I would say clearly we did not do a good enough job in dealing with both African American history as well as any other history of peoples that helped make this country what it is today.
Mm-hmm.
We certainly glossed over the Exclusionary Act that you referred to. We talked about, the Transcontinental Railroad and, the exploitation of, Chinese labor, so forth and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But we certainly didn't go any deeper into that. Mm-hmm. American history is somewhat of a survey course, certainly as it was taught back then. Mm-hmm. And so therefore you're going da-da, you're trying to get through stuff. You never do it, in the best of times. As far as Black history was concerned, given the population of the school, we certainly didn't do, certainly early on, the kind of job that we should have. Mm-hmm. I've actually learned in recent years, just from watching things on TV, that I honestly was not aware of, and which is to my embarrassment. Mm-hmm. The Tulsa riots, for instance. Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, I don't ever remember coming across it. Mm-hmm. And when I saw it on TV, I think if you had seen a picture of me, I was probably just shaking my head.
Yeah. Well, that's fair. I think we all are in the same camp. So let me build on that. Yeah. And I'll let you, take any way you want. So we know that history kind of forms a student's viewpoint of society. And the question I want to know is, what is the importance of history to developing a civic person, a responsible citizen, and, in the sense of being either an activist or a pacifist that kind of say, okay, I give up,
Prior to becoming a department head, civics had been removed from the curriculum of East Orange High School, partially because, if I remember correctly, world history became a mandated subject in the state of New Jersey. Prior to that, world history was an elective, but the state of New Jersey mandated world history as a requirement, which meant that now we had 3 history subjects that were totally required: US 1, US 2, and world history. We wanted to get some electives into the process as well. I honestly don't remember exactly who was responsible or why civics was pulled out, but at the point that I did become a department head, myself and the head of the history department, Clifford Scott, Irwin Sloan, mm-hmm. who ultimately became a football coach at East Orange at one point too. Right. Mm-hmm. We actually we brought the civics course back into as a requirement, I think it was a semester course, not a full year course. Okay. Whether it's still there or not, I really don't know, but both Irwin and I both understood very clearly that this subject is something that we needed to explore with our kids to make them understand both their responsibility to themselves as well as their responsibility to the society as a whole. It's difficult to teach kids what their responsibility to society is when the kids look at their society and don't see that society doing a hell of a lot for them. Okay. And I think that certainly, I taught civics on purpose the first year we brought it back, even though I was a department head and didn't have to teach at all. So I had it was a freshman class, and these kids were pretty hostile, just for the reason that I mentioned. They say, we owe them what, kind of thing.
Right.
And you just try to make them try to see the future as well as the present and what their future could be if they do certain things. And at the same time, I was a strong believer in holding kids or anybody responsible for their actions. And I expected myself to be held to the same standard. And I think that the kids that I had over the years understood who I was and what I believed and how I felt about them. I used to tell teachers in my departments, there's no way you could talk to the kids and tell them how you feel about them. They're going to have to feel it for themselves. If you try to explain how you feel about them, they're going to look upon it as that's just words, nothing else. I said, you have to live your experiences and hope that they, just like a parent with their own kids, you got to be a role model without really trying to be a role model, just being yourself.
Right. Okay, let me get into some stuff about maybe cultural bias and kind of lead that into, I want you to think of it as a two-part question leading to this whole Black Lives Matters movement. So you founded the golf team at East Orange High School. I'm sure you founded that. So, maybe you could talk about the team and, how that transpired and some of that. But then, as you know, golf is a European sport. And maybe there might have been some cultural biases that the team ran into or you ran into on the circuit when you're out there playing golf. So just curious, did any of that happen? Then how did you handle it?
Well, I'll tell you, Tiger Woods was very instrumental in my deciding to get involved in a program like this. I was a big believer in expanding people's viewpoints about a lot of things. I have to tell you, it was very, very frustrating in many ways. Initially, when we first started the program, I had very few kids who would want to become involved in it all. In fact, the kids that became most involved actually were from the Caribbean.
I'm sure, yeah.
Very few Black American kids were getting it. When we first got it, when we first had the program, and like at the end of the day, the kids would be dragging their clubs at the end of the school day or the last period of the day. Sometimes we had to cancel the last period, so we had to travel. Kids would get mocked, by other kids, so forth and so on. Yeah. It was tough for them. It was so many. I could tell you so many funny stories, Ken, that you would cry.
Give me one. Give me one. Well, so where did you guys play? I'm just curious. Where? Because
East Orange has its own golf course that nobody knew about up in the water reserve in all places in Short Hills.
Right, to sit there.
That's where it is. So that was our home course.
Wow.
So a couple of things. I mean, we got a lot of support from the golf course. They would do anything that I asked them to do. They helped us provide some equipment because none of the kids had clubs or anything like that. They were able to get us some, hand-me-down clubs, and we just did the best we could, and we had a good time. I mean, I just loved being with the kids. But funny story. Our first away match was against Seton Hall. Okay. Seton Hall played at Rock Spring Country Club, which is up in West Orange, private club. And it was the beginning of April.
Okay.
It was April 1st or 2nd was our first match. That day, I saw the weather forecast. It was going to be cold, really cold, like in the low 40s and rainy. I told the kids, look, dress in layers so that, you'll be able to, take some clothes off if the sun comes out. The kids show up in these bubble ski jackets. You can't swing a club.
No.
Now I got to tell you, the kids on the other teams, every match that we played, the kids on the other teams were fantastic.
Sure.
They helped. I mean, it was no contest. There was no match. But the kids helped our kids. They tried to teach them some things. It was wonderful. It really was.
That's good to know.
So the first hole on this course is over water.
Yeah.
So we get it onto the tee. Now these kids, if they could hit the ball 50, 60 yards at the time, it was going to be a lot.
Right.
They look at me like, where do we go? I say, I pointed over the water. They look at me, they look at the water, and I said to them, go that way. In other words, don't even try to go over.
Right.
The kids from Seton Hall started to laugh. Our kids started to laugh. It was hilarious. But the other thing is, what did we show up to Seton Hall, to the golf course in? A 50-seat bus. 6 kids.
Yeah.
Now, I was pissed.
Right.
Because the last thing that we needed to do was to show anybody outside of our own community that we were spending that kind of money, because this is private buses. These aren't East Orange owned buses.
Right.
And so I went bananas when we got back. I say, never again do I want to see a bus that size. We need a van. We don't need a bus.
Right.
That kind of thing. So that was both embarrassing and funny at the same time. But the kids, one of the mistakes I made is when the 1 year I scheduled matches over to spring vacation.
Yep.
1 kid showed up.
Yeah. Well, that can happen. So
well, it was a learning experience that. By the way, to this day, there is a Caribbean American Golf Association, CAGA, founded by a couple of my golfers who kept the thing going, and they keep in touch with me every year. They have a tournament. I guess they brought other kids into the thing. So
right.
that's my golf legacy for East Orange.
That's interesting. Well, so good news that basically it was a relatively good experience and there were no major incidents of anything outrageous.
None.
So that's fantastic to know.
Yeah.
So let's build on that. So, the second part of the question is that, we now have this Black Lives Matters movement, and there's clearly some issues with police brutality. That's the main issue up front. What do you think we can basically build upon after we get through police brutality? Because that's pretty much a legislative process. It's going to be a staffing process and so forth. But there are other issues that are really historical, really in your vein, which are historical history. And so, you can think of the civil rights movement and so forth, and, the Voting Rights Act. What do you think from a historical context that you kind of can look this as this is really a pendulum, right? Or a continuum of events. Using your history, what do you think is, what's next, or what should we be looking for next, either legislatively or politically?
Well, I'll tell you, before I get into that, one thing that I know for sure is that you cannot legislate successfully against prejudice. You can pass every law that you want to. Mm-hmm. We have seen a lot of laws do some good, but racism still exists to a great degree in spite of the laws. Attitudinal change is the only way that I see this issue coming to an end, once and for all. Certainly, the Black Lives Matter movement, I think, has had a profound effect, mainly in my mind, because the acceptance of it has been much, much, much wider than any other of the civil rights movements. You're talking about non-minority people becoming involved in the movement, who are supporting the movement, both, I don't know about financially or not, but certainly emotionally, they are. I think that's the single biggest difference of what we're seeing today. And I think the younger generation, all you have to do is look at the voting habits, of the younger generation. I think that's they are the only real potential solution, ultimate solution to the problem. The power structure is still very deeply, I won't say it's racist, but it's also not what it needs to be in terms of confronting race in a very positive way. What's been going on these last several years has been, unacceptable to me. Just from my Facebook post, that's very clear. But I do truly believe that one of the things I've often said, that the people in power are the people that have to give the most, instead of asking those that are seeking power, asking them to give the most. Those who have the power have the most to give. And it's something that, we're fighting the power structure. And it's something that is slowly eroding.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it will pick up more steam with the ensuing generations. And I think that that's the way that the problem will be solved, if it's ever solved. As I say, it's attitude more than laws that are the things that need to change.
Well, building on that, Donald talked about the Exclusion Act and how the Chinese land was taken and so forth, and Congress eventually recognized it was a wrongdoing and had a formal public apology. Same thing was done for the Japanese in terms of their, the
internment policy.
Right. And so therefore, but the Japanese got reparations. In Canada, the same thing happened, which is really interesting in terms of the Aboriginal Canadian Indians. The Canadian government did a public apology and did significant reparations in the percentages of GDP, gave away industries and land and so forth. And even to this day, they get a percentage of the casino money. What's your feeling of reparations for Black Americans, the likelihood of it, what it would look like? And you already kind of allude to the political appetite, so we kind of know the answer, right? But how does that discussion proceed?
I read an interesting article, I guess within the last year or so, by David Brooks, who writes for the New York Times. He used to be known as the liberals' favorite conservative.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
And his view was that giving direct reparations to individuals was not going to solve the problem. That if in fact we could generate the kind of money that would theoretically be needed, to take that money and in effect create a Marshall Plan for the cities. Mm-hmm. Instead of handing it to an individual, in some ways it's very much like I got that $1,200 check because I happen to be alive in the United States with the congressional thing. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I didn't need it. Everybody, I guess, got it. Mm-hmm. That money. What am I going to do with $1,200? What am I going to do even if it was $10,000? How much of a difference in and of itself would that make in my life? For a year or two, maybe it'd make something. Maybe. Right. Maybe if I had kids, it would enable me to send them to college, perhaps. But Brooks's idea that I had never thought of, but even though I used to joke, kidding on the square, as we used to say, that's what the cities needed. They needed a Marshall Plan. They needed huge investments into the area, not just piecemeal. Put up a new school here, put up a new school there. East Orange it's not a new school anymore. I left before that building opened, before the campus high school opened. But there are still a few people that I'm in touch with that worked for me or with me before I retired. Unfortunately, I don't think there's been any significant improvement in the educational system. The turnover of administrators, the principal turnover is still unbelievable. So I am not in favor of individual reparations. I would think that a much wider plan has to be developed, a much more comprehensive plan that's going to attack the issues that need to be solved, whether we see what COVID has done to the minority community. Mm-hmm. Because of health issues that have existed forever. Mm-hmm. They do need. I honestly do not know the solution to the educational issue. I tried. My dream was before I left to see the place really turn around and to see what I would consider a really comprehensive change in the entire educational process in the city of East Orange. I don't think it's happened. I don't know how it will happen again until attitudinal changes take place.
Well, let me interject there. My book coming out, No Tears. I'll plug my book. It's coming out in January. Kind of, it touches on the outline of a Marshall Plan and some issues of education. Of, basically what you're talking about, to not waste the opportunity with a, individual reparations, but more systemic Marshall
Mm-hmm.
Plan aimed at reforming systems. Education system, health system, transportation system, more systemic approach of sustained financing. And one of the issues I talk about in education, which I think is part of the problem, and I had some colleagues at my university VCU that specializes that the public financing of education is part of the problem. That the reliance on the property tax for some substantial amount of funding, given the disparity in property across localities, and you don't really have an effective state transfer system to level the playing field, is part of the issue. Maybe you could speak to that a little bit because you're an educator.
Well, I don't know. I never got into the specifics of the financing per se, other than to know that the cities, if they weren't getting these transfer payments that they do get, they would have no payments. The tax structure of a Newark, an East Orange, or I don't know enough about Newark, but East Orange, of course, we know that the amount of taxes brought in and of itself could not sustain any school system. And to the degree that you make the thing equitable, I forgot what the policy was way back when, the term,
Mm-hmm.
when they were trying to equalize education, amongst the cities and the suburbs in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, they're still relying upon taxes, obviously, for the income. It's just that there's a lot of hostility. I don't know whether it's still. I'm assuming that it still exists, even within a place like Essex County, where if the people living in the suburbs actually saw the statistics of how much of their money was being moved from them into the cities and seeing the results, they were pissed off when I know when I was still there. I don't know whether that, I don't think it was a racist thing per se. I think they wanted to see something going positive for the money that was being quote taken from them.
Right. Well, the extreme example is that the North school system was sometimes taken over by the state.
Right.
I mean, anytime a state takes over educational system, then that's a transfer payment.
Yeah. Well, and it didn't work.
And it didn't work. So
no.
it's like you're saying, that you have this major transfer of resources, and then the question is, what's the result? Now, they would claim that they got recertified. To me, that's a minimal standard.
True.
So
Great.
it's not like you created excellence. Now you got back to treading water. You're not swimming.
Exactly.
You're treading water. You don't have an excellent educational system. So if you're in that system, you're still behind probably years, in terms of certain skills and things like that as you go out to mainstream. And I don't think we really had an honest debate. I know that Mark Zuckerberg recognized that and gave a huge gift to the North school system.
100,000.
I have not heard an accounting of those dollars.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Nobody, it's like it went poof. At the time it was a big gift. And like you said, there's certain things you could do, but I'm of the viewpoint that bricks and mortar can only go so far. Eventually, you get to the point where it's like you said, it's the teachers, dedication, along with some material. Today it turns out to be computers. Like a lot of these kids don't even have computers. There has to be a major investment of teacher training too. And so maybe we could take that to shift to kind of going back to some of your memories, like What are some of your memories of, teaching at East Orange High School and some of your best students you had contact? Do you still keep in contact with them?
Well, look, as I said, the memories are long and deep. I could tell you about certain classes that I had without even naming an individual that kind of blew my mind. I remember specifically having one class of what that I used to call, I defined as street kids,
Okay.
but bright,
Yeah.
innately bright.
Hmm.
And they loved me, I loved them. It was one of my favorite classes of all times. I could say or do anything with these kids because they trusted me.
Hmm.
I had an older woman come in as a practice teacher. In Jersey, you have to practice teach for 8 weeks or something before you can get, certified. And here's this most people that come in as practice teachers are just out of college. Well, this woman had been out of college for years and years and years, had decided she wanted to come back in. She was a liberal. She thought that urban education would be something that she might be a contributor towards.
I can tell you this is
And
good.
so I had her I could only take her for one class. I assigned another teacher to her for the other 3 classes that she was teaching. And I just remember like it was yesterday. She's sitting in the back of the room watching me. She's observing initially, observing my class. And I don't remember what happened, but it was kind of funny. And I said to the kids, I said, man, you are a bunch of animals. Because they were like, and she's sitting in the back of the room. She started to shake because she just couldn't believe that I could say something like that to the kids and then I could get away with it.
Right.
But they laughed at me. I laughed at them. We went on.
Right.
Well, it came time for her to take over the class. So she took the class. I left the room. Now, theoretically, you're supposed to stay in a room just for legally. But I just hung around the area. But I also know that until you're out there on your own, it's not real. If I'm sitting back there, no matter what, it's going to change the dynamic. Bottom line is, she comes out of the room almost in tears.
Really?
I said, what happened? I said, did they yell at you or anything? She said, no. I said, so what's the problem? She said, they would do nothing. They sat there. I would ask questions. They wouldn't respond.
Really?
No matter what. That's how bright these kids were. They were being passive aggressive in the most amazing way. I had never experienced it before, but that's the way this class was. They were so angry at me for abandoning them that they took it out on her.
Interesting.
And I said, well, I'm going to leave you alone for a few more days here, see if maybe some things will change. Now, she didn't have the greatest personality in the world, this woman. But after close to a week, she was getting nothing. So I said, all right, let me go in, take the day off from the class. I went in and I just raised holy hell with the kids. And they just looked at me, they said, we're not changing. Either you're coming back in or we're going to do nothing for the next 6-7 weeks.
Wow.
They won.
The
class won. I had to move her to a different, but that's the thing that I found about the East Orange kids, and having grown up in Patterson even as a young kid, I kind of understood the rules that loyalty is a very important thing. And to a street kid, maybe it's more important than anything, that you have their back, they will have your back. And basically, I always felt that way about the kids, that if they believed that you cared about them, there's almost nothing they wouldn't do for you.
Right.
And that's one of my greatest memories of my career.
Well, that's almost a fantastic ending point because we run up right on that time limit. It's a fantastic hour. It's amazing how when you're having fun, it goes fast,
Yeah.
Let me seem like an hour, but it's great to see you. I'm gonna
Same
give you
here,
the
Ken.
I'm gonna give you the final comment because first I want to thank you for supporting the initiative, and hopefully you'll view some of Donald's stuff, and this will be posted very shortly. But I'll give you the last word.
Well, I'll end with the way I began. I had a great career. I had a tremendous amount of great experiences, but life isn't all just great experiences. But I dealt with the ups and the downs, but the ups overwhelmed the downs. And when people asked me if I was sorry about staying there, I said, not for a second. I never doubted my decision to stay rather than leave, even though kids would come back and say, why are you still here? Former students. But I said, for the same reason I was here for you, I'm here for them.
Got it.
That's my final statement.
Well, thank you, Mr. Rosenberg. I appreciate your support. Hopefully you're entertaining a golf, outing in the future.
Tell me, man, I'm hurting. I hope that I'll get back to my old game.
Yeah, the elbow, is it the knee or the elbow that's the issue?
I have a left rotator cuff issue that has not been surgically repaired. The right one was surgically repaired after breaking up a fight in East Orange High School. I had an Achilles tendon tear that I got playing basketball in East Orange High School.
Okay.
I'm
I got one of those. Man. I got one of those too. So you're in a certain class or club.
You're a youngster, man. Just enjoy life, like I think that you're doing right now.
I plan to. I'm having fun. So you're a good role model for that. But thank you for participating. If you like, you can text me. It's up to you. If you want email contact for students, I don't know if you want to.
No, absolutely. I want to keep in touch with you and see how everything's going. This was a great idea on your part, and I was very proud to be part of it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.